Hey, what's going on, everybody, man? My name's Riley. If it's your first time seeing my face here on YouTube, go subscribe my channel and leave a like on this video. On today's clip, we're bringing y'all some more P. Diddy news, man. It seems like every day there's a new allegation against P. Diddy. At this rate, we're never going to see a trial. But apparently this one's going to be about P. Diddy is now accused of coming onto a married woman. Now, it's fit to, the shoe kind of fits, with all the allegations coming against P. Diddy. So we're going to see, man. A lot of these might just be wishy-washy. A lot of these might be true. That's when we're waiting for this trial to start. But it seems like every day, man, new allegation just like that. And that's definitely slowing down the trial. Other than that, I'm going to stop yapping my jaws. We're just going to hop right in. Let's go.
We all remember last year when Busby held that press conference saying he had more than 100 accusers ready to file lawsuits against the imprisoned mogul. And since, that number has been stacking up.
I
just
can't
maybe
even
not
count
to
that
100
high.
just yet. Even at the beginning of this month, Busby said 10 more lawsuits were expected to be filed against Diddy. So why does it seem like we're getting lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit in the matter of a few weeks? Well, it's because the deadline to file lawsuits despite the statute of limitations being expired is quickly approaching. Long story short, in New York, there was a law in effect that allowed victims of past sexual assaults to file civil lawsuits past the statute of limitations. But the deadline is on March 1st. One of the latest complaints we've seen was filed on February 13th. Similar to a lot of Busby clients, this one was filed by an anonymous client, so we only know her as Jane Doe. According to the complaint, this Jane Doe now lives in Florida, but says she met Diddy back around 1999. At the time, she says she was a 23-year-old model and promotional employee for a radio station. She attended a VIP party hosted by Diddy, who likely was going by Puff or Puffy at the time. At that event, she was introduced to the then Puffy by another guest. She says Diddy talked to her about work over a couple drinks. Later that evening, Jane Doe says she told Diddy she needed to catch her train so she wouldn't be stranded. But she says Diddy invited her to stay at his place to have another drink. According to her complaint, Diddy convinced Jane Doe to stay at his place but assured her that nothing inappropriate would happen and she could leave in the morning. Jane Doe says she told Diddy she was married and she wouldn't fool around. So the two left. But she began to realize something was wrong. According to the complaint, she started to get drowsy, said it was hard for her to remain upright, and she suspected she was drugged. She claims during the drive she noticed several pieces of mail on the floor of the car and texted the address on the mail to her husband. Now, when they arrived, Diddy helped Jane Doe into his home and at first seemed friendly and well-mannered. However, that changed when they were alone. Jane Doe claims Diddy tried to give her more alcohol, but she declined, saying she just wanted to sleep. According to the complaint, while feeling more fatigued, Jane Doe allowed Diddy to help her to bed. She says she tried to keep her clothes on to protect herself, but Diddy insisted that she at least remove her shoes. Once Jane Doe was in the bed, she claims Diddy became aggressive. He tried to take her clothes off and pressured her to engage in sexual activity. She said she refused repeatedly and reminded him she's married. But according to the complaint, Diddy became visibly angry at her resisting and tried to remove her clothes himself, despite her objecting. Now, remember how I mentioned she texted her husband his address she saw from the mail in his car? Well, she told Diddy she texted her husband the address. And while she says Diddy took a beat, it was only temporarily. He then kept groping her and attempting to initiate sexual acts. She claims for 4 hours, Diddy subjected her to continuous unwanted touching and groping of her breasts in privates and even went further. Now, according to the court filing, eventually whatever drug she believed she ingested began to wear off. And then she regained enough strength to insist on leaving Diddy's home and demand he call her a cab. While she still felt the effects of the substance, Jane Doe says she left his home emotionally shaken and physically impaired, as well as shocked by what had happened. Now, Diddy's attorneys denied the allegation, saying no matter how many lawsuits are filed, especially by individuals who refuse to put their own names behind their claims, it won't change the fact that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted or sex trafficked anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. We live in a world where anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason. Fortunately, a fair and impartial judicial process exists to find the truth, and Mr. Combs is confident he will prevail in court. Let's break this down with attorney and former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani.
Hey, time will tell,
thank
man.
you so much
It's gonna
for
be a
joining
crazy
me
trial.
today. What's your reaction to the
Like
allegations
the OJ
in this
trial.
latest complaint of another Tony Busby client, this one being another Jane Doe?
I'm not surprised. Obviously, we know that Tony Busby's clients are going to file, and they're going to file soon because, depending on when the alleged incidents happen, the statute of limitations may be coming up as early as March. And of course, if these complaints aren't filed before then, they lose them. We're talking about a window that's been open under New York City law. Previously, it was New York State. And unless you file within that window, you're prevented from ever filing.
And just going off of that, I remember back in October when Tony Busby held that press conference saying that he had more than 100 accusers ready to file lawsuits against Diddy. Why do you think, there's this kind of rush, it feels like, to file complaint after complaint after complaint all before that March 1st deadline? How much are you surprised by the timing of it instead of just kind of trickling it out? I mean, I guess he has been doing that as well, too. But are you surprised more so that so many are coming day after day after day?
I'm not surprised, Elizabeth, and this is why. And like this goes back to sexual abuse and statute of limitations being open. It really happened when the Catholic Church sex abuse scandal broke in Boston, and states decided to open up the statute of limitations for these sexual assault and sexual abuse claims. Some states actually opened it up for both criminal and civil. And the criminal statute of limitations, at least in California where I am, was litigated and it was struck down and said it violated the ex post facto clause of the Constitution. You can't retroactively make something criminal, but you can retroactively create civil liability even though the statute has run. So what states ended up doing is extending statute of limitations or even creating what we're seeing now, which are look back windows. So you might say, well, if you file within 1 year, it doesn't matter when the sexual assault or sexual abuse happened, you can file. But really, how this whole thing started, Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit back in 2023 now because she was up against the statute of limitations in New York State. They were negotiating and the discussion was reportedly 10 million or 20 million or 30 million. They were unable to come to an agreement. Cassie Ventura files her lawsuit. Of course, it settled the very next day, but the lawsuit was public and it was too late. So I think Diddy really and his lawyers misplayed their hand and didn't anticipate the possibility that Cassie would file because she was running out of time.
And I just remember when that jaw-dropping lawsuit was first filed, it really was just shocking to see. And then, of course, we can always
Like
argue
a
that,
match.
her lawsuit and the filing of
Huge
it
fire.
really just kind of opened the window for a lot of alleged victims to come forward and make their allegations against Diddy as well too. Going back to this Jane Doe in particular, there are a couple of things that kind of stand out to me in this complaint. One being the time frame. Now it says in or around 1999. Is it crucial in these complaints to have a specified time frame of when this allegedly happened?
I think when you get to a jury, it is going to matter. Obviously, we're talking about allegations now that are more than 25 years old. And to the extent that these cases go to trial, I'm not saying they're all going to go to trial. Maybe they'll settle, but jurors are going to want some more specificity and they're going to want to know why it took 25 years to report. Because the defense is going to argue that this was all fabricated, this was a money grab, they're just piling on. So you really want to kind of go back in time and say, well, look, I told a friend, I told a family member, and they can come corroborate my account of what happened, as opposed to, you know, her being the 100th person who's filed a civil lawsuit by the same lawyer. It can be somewhat challenging
That lawyer
when
is getting
the
paid.
report doesn't happen until many years later. Now, I understand the psychology of an abuse victim. I'm not saying it's not true. Many victims, they don't want to come forward and share their story and be re-victimized again. And when you do have a Cassie Ventura who was with Diddy for so long and she tells her story, then there's a Me Too type movement where there's strength in numbers. So I'm not saying I don't believe the victim in this case, but it's something that is going to be important when that case goes to a jury, because that's the question that those jurors are going to have.
And going off of that, and possibly what may be a defense argument here, is that another point that really stuck out to me was the plaintiff here said that she texted her husband the address. And I know, obviously, in today's age, we all text, we all like FaceTime, etc. But I bring this up because this was 1999, and I did have to Google this because I was just 5 years old at the time, not to age myself, but and Google did say that texting did exist, but the technology itself isn't like it is today. But what do you make of that part in the complaint where, do you think that this will be an issue later on? Texting in 1999, it's not as common as it is in 2025.
Look, it is a problem with these details, and I'm a little bit older, a lot older. So I remember 1999, and I had a cell phone, but I think it was like T9 texting back then. It certainly wasn't full keyboard, or I don't recall it being a full keyboard. So you have to push the number 3 times to get the letter that you wanted. But this is a problem with some of these older claims. And again, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but you have these inconsistencies, right? And you have some of the other victims who are represented by Busby who've come forward and they've given interviews, and the year has been off. Or, one of the victims alleged said that, my dad dropped me off, but it was a 3-hour drive. So, you have these types of inconsistencies where folks are saying something, and based on the timing or the location, it's just not true. Now, innocent misrecollections happen all the time, but there are jury instructions that say that if you think a witness or a party is lying about any detail, if it's a material one, you're free to discount their testimony entirely. So now all of a sudden you're creating another argument for the defense where they'll say, look, the reason the texting was discussed not because it was a mistake. This whole thing was fabricated, and this person didn't even realize that technology didn't exist in 1999.
And, we've talked about a number of the complaints filed by Tony Busby's law firm, and a lot of them really do kind of read very similar to one another. But there's always a point
texting was
made that
definitely
Diddy
possible
was
back then,
motivated
so
by gender, by both men and women. And I bring that part up specifically because just a few days ago, Macy's, who was named in another Busby complaint on a different allegation, different litigation, all of that, claimed that Diddy was an equal opportunity predator. So, what are your thoughts on this whole aspect that Diddy was motivated, by gender, but then motivated by gender, but both genders?
Yeah, that's not something that you typically see. Again, I'm not saying that it's true, but having handled many sexual assault cases as a prosecutor and a civil plaintiff's lawyer, I represent victims now, like Tony Busby. You typically see a profile of someone who is alleged to commit sexual assault or a rapist, right? They will either target women of age or young boys, or they tend to have a profile, right? It's not common where you see someone who is alleged to have raped both men and women, young and old, like the allegations are against Diddy. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's not something that is typical in the profile of an assailant that you see.
And Nima, we're
they
in
come in all
February now.
different
In just a
sizes and
couple months, in
shapes,
3 months, it's May. It's a
but they
huge
all
month
love
for
12
Diddy.
gauge
That's when he's
shotgun.
expected to go on
Promise
trial.
you that.
What are you expecting out of his trial? And at this time, do you think federal prosecutors have enough to make their case?
I do, and Elizabeth, you're right. All eyes are on May 5th, and I think the trial will go on May 5th or shortly thereafter because Diddy's reportedly not doing well in custody, so he's going to want to get this started. We know it's going to call 100 different victims. They're going to choose their best victims, and they're probably not going to call victims who have made inconsistent statements, not because they don't believe them. They just want to keep their case as tight and as ironclad as possible.
They're trying to
So
get a
we know,
win.
of course, victim number one, named in the original indictment, Cassie Ventura, she is going to be the star witness. Not just because she was with Diddy so long, because we know there's video evidence of at least one physical assault. We've all seen it at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, where I live. So she's going to be victim one. But now there's a superseding indictment that names two other victims, not by name, but V2 and V3. So we know that the government is going to present at least 3 victims. I expect those to be the best victims in terms of evidence that corroborates their stories and lack of potential inconsistencies. So we'll see what evidence the government presents. And of course, we know the defense is going to come after them very aggressively during cross examination.
Exactly. And how do you think that'll play in front of a jury? These are, alleged victims of Sean Diddy Combs, but going at women or potentially what could be men as well too, going at them aggressively after they have to kind of recount what had happened to them, allegedly by Diddy and all of that sort. How do you think that'll play in front of a jury? And do you think the defense will just kind of paint the picture that the alleged sex trafficking was consensual in a way? These were just his ex-girlfriends. I think that's what one of the response from the defense has said at the point when the superseding indictment came down. But what do you think the defense is going to kind of try to throw there?
You're absolutely right, Elizabeth. The defense will be and has to be that this was all consensual. There's really a couple ways to defend a rape case. The first is to say that it wasn't me. I didn't participate in the sex acts. Well, we know a lot of these freak offs were recorded, so that's not going to be a good defense. And there are plenty of witnesses there, folks, in his entourage.
Yeah, that's gonna
So
get
then the
them.
next
They got the
argument
tapes.
has to be that the sex acts happened, but they were consensual acts between adults, and adults can consent to sex, no matter how freaky it is, right? So we know that's what the defense is going to be in this case. So that's what I expect. Obviously, um, the government is going to say, well, these are individuals that were drugged, they couldn't consent, or they were coerced, they couldn't consent. Because, right, the difference between consensual sex acts and sex trafficking, which is charged here, is force, fraud, or coercion. So that's the step that the government is going to try to get to with these witnesses.
Yeah, and I'm sure, a lot of eyes, even though there are no cameras in the courtroom, but a lot of people will probably be very anxious for this outcome, especially Diddy here. Nemo Romani, I want to thank you so much for your insight into this. Before we sign you off, though, anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's it. Really kind of big lawsuit. And also, I mean,
Good luck,
Diddy's
Diddy.
going on the offensive as well. He sued NBC recently for defamation as well. So a lot of civil cases going on, but of course the criminal case takes priority. So I think that's going to really dictate where we end up here.
All right, y'all, that's gonna wrap this one up. If you enjoy this type of content, I'm gonna have a playlist linked right here in the end of the video. It's gonna have all the reactions on there for y'all to check out. If you have made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you for watching to the end. It means a lot to me if you guys go down there, smash the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell so you know when we do upload this fire content. Come check it out. Other than that, man, I hope you all enjoyed, and y'all hope you'll have a blessed rest of your day. Other than that, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.